Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are reading the Phaedo. Why are we reading the Phaedo? Why are we reading the Phaedo? Well, overall, this channel has a mission to understand, to discover, to awaken philosophy. And on this quest, we have realized this isn't good enough. You can't just understand what philosophy is. You have to understand what it's not. Philosophy happens to be the most important thing we can do on this planet, but also it's the most misunderstood thing, or one of the most misunderstood things out there. Fortunately, we have the words from a great man named Socrates. People call him the father of Western thought. They say everything since Socrates is but a footnote to Socrates. These are nice sayings, but we want to know why. Why is everything after Socrates less than Socrates? Well, we've been reading the Phaedo and we've been discovering it for ourselves. Socrates, on his last day in the book we're reading called the Phaedo, left us behind something important, immensely important. The thing that allows us to escape our chains of fate, the repeating, inevitable, even predictable cycles of problems that we have in our life, symbolized by freeing from chains, and reach our destiny, the highest, most important spiritual and personal goals that we can reach. Goals that make us live happy, will allow us to live a happier life, a more virtuous life, to act in a beneficial way towards ourselves and others, but also a kind of learning and development that will allow us to incarnate into a better place. What the Hindus might say, escape the cycles of reincarnation. Socrates is laying this all out for us, but he's doing it in a certain kind of a way where we have to play the game too. Because if we have to learn this special thing, a kind of understanding, not just understanding, a kind of understanding that can be verified in your own direct experience of higher states of mind, also higher dimensions of reality, same thing, integrated into our way of being, which is why we have to practice it, which is the virtues, which can awaken a kind of learning that we can take with us into the next world. He says this is important for you to have yourself, because if you just believe the arguments that he's setting forth, then somebody's going to come along and just contradict them. And they're going to contradict them in a way that might sound probable because they're a scientist, or they might sound attractive because it's familiar with your own mythology, your own spiritual upbringing or religious upbringing. And then you'll end up, well, hey, I trusted Socrates, now maybe I can't trust humans. Or, the greatest defect of the soul, maybe there is no understanding. Maybe there isn't a universal, open to everyone, objective understanding called the Logos. And why is that the worst thing that can happen? It'll prevent you from going from understanding to noesis. Being. Experiencing truth, which is what we're here for. So that's the groundwork of the overview of what we're doing so far. And jumping into the chat. Hello, Beast Rice Maker. I know this is reading. Of course you can ask questions. I encourage questions. I might take a moment or two to get to them if I'm in the middle of a spiel like I just was. But please, I love questions. Questions are what this is all about. In fact, that's part of what it means to be a philosopher. Philosophers aren't having the answers all the time. That's not philosophy. Philosophy is about discovering questions, cultivating questions, nurturing them, polishing them up, getting your questions all nice and shiny, getting rid of extra words, making it into a sentence maybe, having all the key things you want to be answered in that sentence, and carrying it with you. Because to have a question is to be on the quest, a quest. And our premise is, philosophy is the ideal quest. We've mentioned that in video games there are certain tropes certain things you need for it to be an attractive game. There needs to be a hero. There needs to be a leveling up. There needs to be challenges. Just like in movies and screenwriting, there is the hero's journey. The main character has to follow these stages for it to be engaging to us for some way, in some way. And our hypothesis is, well, actually, if there is an archetype for games, for movies, for scripts, for films, what would be the ideal representation? What would all these be examples of? If hero's journey is an adjective that we can apply to all these different things, what's the noun? What's the thing itself? And our hypothesis is it's what Socrates is doing. Socrates is the ideal hero, fulfilled the ideal hero's quest. Philosophy is our task to match him. Therefore, all of us here on this channel, following along, wherever you are in the game.
You're a wizard, Harry.
The ultimate game. The reason we're here. The ideal hero's journey. The ideal quest. The quest of man. And if it's a quest of man, that must be the destiny that we can reach at the end of it is the destiny of man. In fact, some people go even further. Well, hang on a second. If all intelligent beings who develop language develop an intelligence that can reflect on itself so that it can ask what's the nature and meaning of themselves, any alien species who have awoken that level of intelligence will realize that this is what we're here for. In fact, Socrates, in what we're reading, says all physical things seek this thing. So it's not just the destiny of man, it's the destiny of all life forms, in all universes, at all times. Which is fascinating that we can understand that. Not just understand it, which is itself better than beliefs. We don't have to have an opinion about it. We might start with it as an opinion or a belief from Socrates. You can't stop there. You have to engage in the art, learn it yourself, and find out why it has to be this way. Why should this change my mind? Be convinced. That's going from belief to understanding. And of course, in philosophy, that understanding is a stepping stone to directly confirming it in your experience. In chat, destiny and fate, are they the same thing, different? Oh, good question. This is at the heart of what we're doing. So fate is like your problem. The train tracks your life is on. You are fated to, this guy grew up in a poor house with an alcoholic father in a small rinky-dink town. He's fated to live the same tragedy his parents. The family curse, we can call it. Fate is negative. Fate is, if you aren't able to free yourself from the shackles of fate, you will go through repeating cycles of problems that you can see has a theme. A theme that is repeated in every area of your life if you reflect on it. In your relationships, the same states of mind come up. The same words, the same negative self-talk, the same kinds of failures happen repeatedly. In school, same thing. In your quest to master philosophy, same thing. And if you're not able to understand them sufficiently enough to free yourself from it, you are on a train track to a certain inevitable negative conclusion, a negative state of mind, a negative opinion about the world, and balloons, shouldn't have balloons for fate, and a kind of disaster. That's fate. Destiny is the opposite. Freeing yourself from fate gives you the freedom, the power, the energy, the lack of distractions, lack of chains, to be able to reach your destiny, but it isn't the destiny itself. It's not simply a freedom from your ignorance. It frees you up to better climb that other ladder. Now in philosophy, we talk about this in terms of a ladder that leads up, different states of mind, levels of understanding, experiences of self and reality. And we give that the name, the ladder of the logos. because it's objective. Anyone can understand it. In fact, that system of understanding is reflected in all areas. Just like your problem is reflected in all areas of your life, so too is the ideal reflected in all areas of your life. In fact, this idea of something universal that's reflected in different things, which is fantastic, that allows us to wake up to understanding the logos, the understandable structure. But this ladder has its shadow. What can potentially be amazing has a negative shadow, which means if you don't have the logos but the pathologos, the sick logos, that also will show up in all of your areas. So in music, you can discover, there are certain patterns, relationships, key terms that are reflected in geometry as well, reflected in biology, but also reflected in philosophy, the soul, the self, reality. So that's why it's important to be doing philosophy while you learn music, because it makes music more meaningful. You can use your insights and understanding in music to awaken greater insights in the higher. That's called analogy. This level is an analogical, follows the same relationships but with different terms that can provide insight to the higher level. So understanding music, understanding math, whatever your interest is, can awaken insight into yourself. That's what makes it meaningful. Yes, this podcast is uploaded to YouTube. You can follow along underneath. There's a link to YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can watch live on Twitch and ask questions like our friend Beast Rice Maker here. So you can ask questions. You can also join the Discord, share your understanding, share your insights, share your questions, practice the art, because philosophy is not a one-person game. If you get value out of this channel, you can feel free to subscribe on Patreon too. I got one of those now, so you can do that. Interesting, no one's explained it like that to me. That's great to hear. I'm doing my best. So my background is I've been studying philosophy for about 20 years with a master of philosophy himself, somebody who is in the tradition of Socrates. He recently passed away. Ironically, we're reading a text where Socrates passes away and his friends are sad about that. And he says, "Don't be sad, you idiots." Don't you know that philosophy is the art and practice of death and dying? If there is a knowingness, a verification of your understanding in direct experience, then you can't see it through your physical senses. Looking through your physical senses at best can make you a lover of learning. If there are three parts of the soul, there's a desiring part. You can become a lover of riches and try and get rich. Some people, that second part of the soul, the outward moving, want to get famous. And some people are motivated by that smallest part of the soul, the reasoning part, and they can become a lover of learning. But the problem with that is, the things that you learn about, that you really seek, you can't see with your physical senses. You can only see examples of them. So you can see a beautiful thing, but then you look over there and you see another beautiful thing. And then you look at a painting, oh, that's a beautiful painting. You can only see a example. So beauty is an adjective. Socrates says, okay, once you realize that, you can make a transition from a lover of learning, philos mathesis, philos means love, to a lover of wisdom, philosophia. Wisdom is applying your love of learning to learning where the noun is. If that's a beautiful thing and a beautiful thing, instead of asking about A's, ask about these. What's the beautiful? Or the beauty itself. In the Greek, they say, what's self-beauty? It has its own existence. It's a kind of self. So go from adjectives that you see with your physical senses to nouns. Well, then how do you see it? Because all human beings start by looking through their eyes and listening through their ears. That's a kind of sense that we awaken through philosophy. Through purification of our problems, escaping our fate, that which makes us close-minded, makes us blindly loyal to our prejudices from our upbringings, from our society, from our culture, also from our evolution. There was a kind of evolutionary benefit to thinking, oh, everyone inside my cave is good, everything outside the cave is bad, because we're not going to go into it today, but there were some very unique conditions to the evolution of humanity after the meteorite hit and wiped out all the big animals. So we had to evolve fast. So this blind obedience to the tribe leader within the cave when we were cavemen allowed us to not get eaten by saber-toothed tigers. Now, of course, this was a solution that no longer works, as all problems are. Solutions that no longer apply. This is where we are in our world. The world is run by groups. And these fascists try and get people to follow them by saying, oh, you're good because inside cave good. Your opinions, your belief, the color of your skin is good. But everyone outside is bad and scary and should be killed or genocided, or they're the cause of our problems. Of course, that's not the real cause of our problems. To understand causes requires understanding. Reflection on causes, the system of doing that is called the dialectic. To do it well. It's easy to blame people who don't look like you for your problems. That's why these fascists get 50% of the vote all the time. It's appealing. You don't have to do anything. You can pretend you're wise. But if you actually want to understand the cause of your problems and the cause of your excellence, not just going from sickness to health, removing your problems, but going from health to excellence, if you really want to find the real cause, now you're in philosophy. Because those causes are not in the physical world. Philosophy is applying your understanding to the realm of being, that which is pure, immortal, deathless. We call it the metaphysical universe, or not universe, metaphysical realm, because metaphysics means before physics. So that's where you find the nouns: self-beauty, self-justice, not an example or an adjective of a just referee or a just lawyer or a just superhero, but justice itself. You need to reflect properly on causes, that's the dialectic, and you realize, oh, the causes of these physical examples are in the realm of being, and if you've made that jump, you've gone from a lover of learning, philomethesis, to a lover of wisdom. Now, you still haven't got wisdom, because loving something doesn't mean you have it. It means you desire it, you seek it, you want union with it. That's why it's a virtue. You have to practice it. It's easy to get to spend your life running around after your desires, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. But if you practice understanding the realm of being, that's all the time, that's the virtue called wisdom. Now, once you get there, and in the Phaedo, Socrates' last day, so this around me is what his prison cell might have looked like. He says, look, you can actually do it. In fact, that's what yoga is. All yoga, pretty much. Yoga means to join with that which is higher. So essentially all yoga is about how to separate your soul from your physical senses. Socrates gives his. But the thing is, if you've been practicing your virtues and your way of separating has been through understanding, Not through holding your breath, not through taking lots of drugs, not through sitting on a mat for 40 years and chanting, but through understanding the things you naturally are curious about. Why do I have my problems? And what's myself? What's my real self? Then once you get there, once you can separate the soul from the body, you can understand the realm that you're in now. And you can integrate that experience into those virtues, and those virtues upgrade. They level up. Level up is this noise. Into the virtue for the sake of which we do all the virtues, phronesis, a virtue that doesn't lose its power, can maybe stay with us even into the next life. Phronesis is the ultimate virtue. One of our puzzles we've had all the way through this read-along is what the heck is phronesis? Because Socrates has been saying philosophers seek two things. Yeah, classic level up sound, right? They seek balloons, they seek truth and being, but they also seek this virtue called phronesis. So we're trying to figure out what it is. And that's what philosophy is about. You're like Sherlock Holmes. You have to take part. As we read, you look for patterns. You look for key terms, you pull them out. You try and find questions and hidden questions. You carry them in your inventory, your question sack. Take all these questions with you because having questions make you be on a quest. Classic quest acceptance sound. Because that focus, along with that question, along with that open-mindedness, along with seeing how meaningful these questions are, come together into a state which is called meditation. Meditation is sustained concentration. Now, if it's a meditation on these kinds of questions, what is beauty itself? What is justice itself? What is the soul? Is the soul immortal? These questions which are about being, not about the physical world of becoming, where everything's coming into being or dying. Everything is in change in our physical world. Not the realm of becoming, the realm of being. If your questions are about that meditation, if you can hold on to it, if you're not distracted by pretty shapes and colors of the physical senses, desires for fame, desires for riches, if you stay focused, that meditation can upgrade to contemplation, where you join with your object of focus and you actually experience it. This experience is a cognitive function that we do not have a word for in English. In Greek, it's called nous or noesis. So this is also part of philosophy. You have to learn the language. One of the reasons why we can only play this game in the last 5 years or so is all of the previous translations of Socrates' work, Socrates' words, have been mistranslations. They've missed key words, partly because of the political and religious forces affecting the translator, partly because of the translator's own problems, and partly because they haven't realized the significance of these words, and partly because of the limitations of the English language that the ancient Greeks didn't have. So certain keywords, logos, one of them. That system of understanding, dianoia, understanding, but applied to being. So when we read Socrates and we read, he says it's understanding is important. Yeah, I do that. I go to school. I take physics classes. No, that's not understanding. No. 2. Yeah. Dianoia is the Greek word that means understanding applied to being. And when you can actually experience it, the sense that has the ability to turn around and know itself, that's called ousia. We don't have a word for that in English. Ousia, so we need to add the word ousia. It's a function of your mind that can turn around and know itself. And when you can know it, like science, which is only looking through the physical senses, can only have probability. That's what theories are. That's why theories always change with new evidence and things like that, or new ideas. But in if you're understanding being, you can actually experience being. That's why it's called the actual spiritual tradition. And that experience is called noesis or nous. So we don't have a word for that. In the past translations, it's been called knowledge. Yeah, so we're learning about Socrates. Thanks for that in the chat. Because, okay, this is important. Socrates is part, let's bring up our notes. We talked about last time, this is the tradition that we're in. Now, the earliest philosopher that we know about is this guy named Xenophanes. It's the earliest works we have, and all we know from him is he asked the question, or encouraged us to hold the question, what is the whole of seeing, hearing, and thinking right now? What is the whole of it? So notice, he's not looking at a particular thing, he wants us to wonder what's the whole itself. Interesting question, I wonder why that's important. He taught Parmenides. We have a work where Parmenides and Socrates meet. And Parmenides says, hey, bud, you don't really understand the realm of being. You're using a language of the physical world that's going to make it confusing to understand this higher dimension. So you need to learn the dialectic. And it's from that work, it's called the Parmenides, that we have done work, and you can see these videos in another playlist on YouTube, where we read through the introduction and the first hypothesis of Parmenides to figure out what exactly this dialectic is, because Parmenides says, hey, if you don't practice yourself in that way that the many say is useless, you're never going to reach truth. In fact, we have some cool quotes. Here we go. Parmenides said to Socrates when Socrates was a baby, when he was like 19. Parmenides was 60. Socrates, you have to collect thyself together by exercising more in that way that appears to be useless to the multitude, the dialectic, and is called by them empty talk. For if you do not, while you are still young, the truth will utterly elude you. So we spent that time figuring out what the heck the dialectic is. And of course he says, by the way, one of your problems, Socrates, so he not only gave him the information and what would help him reach truth in being, he was also able to use his art to diagnose Socrates' problem. Because keep in mind, we have two things as human beings. We have this ladder up, a ladder that we can climb to master the art of the logos. Now, one of those rungs is understanding. One of those rungs is our states of mind. We're not just robots. We also have a state of mind attached. So every level of understanding, like right at the bottom, you have a way of thinking called nihilism, where you think, nothing is real, everything is stupid, everything is an illusion. And that's going to have an accompanying state of mind. But then as you learn, you'll realize, well, actually that can't be the case, because I can have a conversation with someone and they can understand my way of thinking called nihilism. So there has to be something to allow us to understand each other. So there's at least language. But, language is all relative. There is no truth to language. It's all made up. So, okay, so nihilism isn't right, but it's all relative. Relativism. Yeah, boo nihilism. Yeah, right. Then you're at relativism. And by the way, there will be a kind of logic to his thinking. You can understand why he's attracted to nihilism. And he will have a feeling state. Depressed, lonely, empty. Relativism is probably the next stage. Everything is relative. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But then if you meet someone who's a philosopher, and we all are really, someone who's done a bit of work, a bit of reading, watched a few of these podcasts, they're practicing the art of the logos. They're practicing to ask certain questions. Notice questions are key. That gets him to reflect on himself. What's that like? Ousia, like that function of mind that can turn around and experience itself. Mind, minding mind. That's the oneness experience. So it's like that, but it's through the physical world, self-reflection. Hey, by the way, if everything is relative and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, why do we have supermodels? Surely there's something objective about beauty, right? So this might get him to reflect and realize this way of understanding on this rung of this rail of the ladder, and his state of mind of emptiness or depression. If everything's all relative, then who cares? You can go to the next step. So we can map all of the steps of thinking and states of mind on a ladder. And if that's the case, you should be able to understand it. And then at a certain rung of the ladder, you're open to the existence of being. The metaphysical world. The world that's the cause of the physical world. So, okay, religious people might be above that. They think, okay, there is God, something different, something that's not physical, we call him God. But, we can't know him. We can just have groups that kind of imitate what it would be like to know. And that person might learn about meditation and be able to climb up and so on. But while there is a shadow, a ladder that we can say is the journey to our destiny, we can say that's what's true. And if we live our life, we're putting into our soul the virtues, practicing it, and we can reach the realm of being. That this ladder has a shadow. People in our youth usually who appeared to be knowing, appeared to have the virtues, appeared to be true, related to us in a certain way where we walk away with a false belief about self and reality. And that's the cause of our negative self-talk, our problems, our blocks. And this is this ladder, which is this shadow of a ladder, kind of looks like train tracks, leading you to your fate. The shadow of being. Dad looked really strong and knowing. He looked like being when we were watching TV, and he turned to me, and in a rare moment, he passed on a secret teaching that seemed to be for my benefit. So it had all of the hallmarks of being, of reality itself. It seemed to be wise. It seemed to be caring. It seemed to be passing on a teaching, logos. And he said to me, "Son, never trust women." And I thought, wow, this is it. And ever since then, I didn't ask him any questions because I didn't want to ruin the moment. But ever since then, I've never trusted women. So you can see what kind of life that person with that kind of false belief about truth might have, what kind of a life he might live in his jobs, If he has a job and his woman is a boss, he might say, "I'm not listening to you," or whatever. So, if our job that Socrates is saying we have to do while we're here is learn a kind of understanding, logos, that follows a structure, that structure is called the dialectic, that leads towards being, so that you can use it artfully to benefit yourself and also others, because it's, we have friends, we have people in the community. That's called the art of the logos. Now, that art of the logos is needed to not only understand our journey up, understand all systems of thought, understand all spiritual traditions, making the mystical, what is Buddhism? It's so strange and far away in Asia, and wow, what is Taoism? What is Hinduism really? What is meditation? All of these things that can seem strange because we don't understand them can be made simple and understandable with the art of the Logos. This is why Socrates said in the Phaedo, many people call themselves mystics, claim to be spiritual. Many people carry the staff, but few are the actual mystics. Got a quote. And those people, many are the staff bearers, is the bumper sticker. Where is it? Here we go. Many are the staff bearers, but few are the inspired mystics. We would call spiritual today. These are, according to my opinion, none other than those who practiced philosophy correctly. Here's another quote, throw another one in. While we live, we will be closest to knowing nous, when we neither associate nor commune with the body any more than is necessary. Only eat the sandwiches you need to eat. Don't eat all the sandwiches. We must purify ourselves from the body until the divine self and more immortal and eternal part of your own self should liberate us. Thus being purified, keyword, by having been liberated. Oops, let's go there one more time. Thus being liberated from the phronesis of the body, keyword phronesis, we don't exactly know what it is. Something to do with attention, maybe. Attachment, identity, not sure. Liberating from phronesis of the body, we shall be likely to be with such a kind. And through ourselves we shall know all that is pure. This is likely to be the truth. One more quote, because why not? Self-justice, self-beauty, and good, the nouns of all the selves in being, they have a kind of life and existence in being, are contemplated not through the body, but whosoever prepares themselves by most accurately understanding, dianoia, each of those selves investigated, they will approach closest to nous, the intuitive knowing of each being. That's what we want. We want to get there. So that's an overview of what Socrates is leaving for us. And he says, you can't just trust me, because when I'm gone, there's going to be people who claim to be wise. We know them very well. There's a million podcasts and life coaching seminars and pyramid scams by these people. They will claim to be wise and understanding. And you know what they'll say will make them wise? They will say there is no actual logos. There is no understanding. And that's why I'm smarter. I'm smarter than the medical doctors because I realize there is no way of understanding the human body. Therefore, there's no art. And this is a problem we face in philosophy because a lot of philosophers grew up in this tradition where we deviated away from Socrates. They'll say there's no understanding. They'll say there's no realm of being. There's just the physical world. That's all we can know. And they'll say, therefore, there's no art. There's no skillful and beneficial use of the logos to help people, to solve problems, healing, and to reach excellence, purification, and perfection. There's none of that. So just believe me, join my group based on belief. And that's where we are in humanity. We have to drop that ignorance and learn what we need to actually understand for ourselves and for humanity. Now we can also understand where we got to this point. Xenophanes. By the way, philosophy now is often thought of as personal opinions. What's Kant's philosophy? What's Hegel's philosophy? What's my crazy Aunt Joe's philosophy? Socrates, that's not philosophy, that's opinion. That's lover of opinion. And if they're just looking through their physical senses, they're just lovers of bodies. Philosomatos, soggy tomatoes, is all they will see. Philosomatos means lover of the body, not lover of being or wisdom. So how do we get there? Well, back before philosophy meant love of opinions, again, many, like we talked about, a beautiful thing, a beautiful thing, a beautiful thing. We need to ask what's the beauty itself. So too with philosophy, a philosophy, a philosophy, a philosophy. What's the philosophy? This is what was called the perennial philosophy, the parent philosophy. Sometimes it's called Platonic philosophy. But even that sounds like, oh, Platonic philosophy is just one of these in a list. No. It's the noun. It's not opinions. So how do we get to there? Well, Parmenides taught Socrates, and we have some quotes. We looked at them just a moment ago. Socrates was killed by the government for being the best human there ever was, giving us what we need to understand our problems and reach excellence, ourselves as individual souls and collectively as humans. He was killed. Why? Our shadow. It feels true that people different to me are bad. Oh, inside cave good, outside cave bad, scary. It's a problem. It's a human problem. If we are discovering what's true, how do we share it? Because if they don't have this art of the logos, they're going to be blindly loyal to their ignorance. Yeah, that's human history. It's soaked in blood. People fighting over their stupid ignorances, their personal opinions. Their groups. My cave believes in this. It's all division, us versus another. But the thing about being is it's one. If it's being, it's true, it's universal. If we can know it, then there's a part of our soul that's the same as every other soul. Because being is a oneness. So how do we get from our barbarianism, blind loyalty to whatever was familiar, to truth? That's a question. Because Socrates was killed. And so he was killed before he was able to teach Plato enough. Plato was in his 20s, I think. So he wasn't able to help him use his art of the logos to help. That's called philosophical midwifery, by the way. And Plato therefore couldn't help Aristotle, and Aristotle really missed the mark. Aristotle completely left the realm of being and started looking only at the physical world, and that's our tradition. He taught Alexander the Great, a great tyrant who went around killing people for fun, because he thinks it's good, for fame and riches, all that opposite of philosophy. So that's our tradition. And also, this tradition from Aristotle is the Latin tradition. They don't have a word for the. So they couldn't even begin philosophy. That's our tradition. That's the historical reason why we have to reawaken philosophy. And the reason why we can do it now and not in the past is we have a translation where we have the keywords translated properly. That's why we read. That's why this is a podcast, but also we read. It's not about our opinions like most podcasts. It's how do we discover truth? And how do we discover the artful use of truth to benefit? To have an art, like the art of medicine, you need a paradigm. What is the healthy body? You need an ideal as being. You need a way of understanding how and why it's the ideal body, the logos. There needs to be a structure, a hierarchical arrangement of different levels of health. That's the dialectic. And you have to be able to use it to benefit the particular person you're talking to. Not benefit yourself, not make you famous or rich. That's called corruption. If a doctor gave medicine to make himself rich but wasn't only benefiting the health of his patient, we'd call that corruption. He'd lose his license. Using it to benefit your subject makes it an art. Now, we don't have that. Famously, politicians are screwing over everyone to make themselves rich and famous. Why do we allow corruption? Oh, because there's no truth about how to run the world. There's no ideal of justice. There's no art that every single politician must master, like every single doctor or every single pilot and so on, every other profession. Socrates predicted our problem 2,500 years ago, and he's introducing the art of the logos. We have to learn it. That's where we are. Oh, you missed all that. Oh, okay, well, I'm not going to repeat all that. I just did a big thing. But you can watch this on YouTube. So, also, as we go through, we're seeing that part of the dialectic, which is the structure of the art of the logos, requires you to see not just what's true about philosophy, but what's false about philosophy. Not just what's true about beauty, but what's false about beauty. What's true about philosophy? It's to do with being. It's okay. You can watch along on YouTube. So as we're going, Socrates says you have to learn this art for yourself. So I'm going to give you the story of how I went from a lover of learning, this guy here. So this is our soul. We have our inwardly desiring part. We have our outwardly moving part. This guy wants to be rich. This guy wants to be famous. And then we have this guy who the reasoning part of our soul. If you are mastered by that part of your soul, then you want to learn. But how do we go from learning about our physical world to learning about the realm of being? How do we go from adjectives to nouns? Good question. Don't know. There's a lot of people who go to university, but there are very few philosophers. Why? How do we go from the world of becoming to the realm of being? Socrates is giving us his story of how he got there. That's where we are in the text. So we want to find out what made him go there, but also we want to find out how is he sharing it with us, because we can't just believe him. We have to find out how is he talking, how is he helping his friend out, because we want to master that. To be enlightened, yes, to be enlightened. And we can understand all of the stages of enlightenment. There's Buddhist enlightenment there, and there's Taoist enlightenment there, and there's the Hindu enlightenment there, and there are a certain state of enlightenment that Christian mystics get into, and there are Sufi mystics there, and so on and so on. With philosophy, we can understand all of them. So that's saying a Buddhist and a Taoist cross their paths pass each other on a path, but they don't recognize each other. Why? Because philosophy is the only spiritual tradition, the only tradition of enlightenment, which is based on understanding. So a Buddhist here might not recognize a Taoist here. A philosopher can see both, but also use the art of the logos to ask them questions so they can go beyond their tradition. And of course, if you try that, you will probably I bet you $1 that if you try and say that, oh, by the way, if you start reading Socrates, you will learn the art of understanding your tradition. You can bring logos into your tradition. Well, where are humans? Humans are stuck here. So the dialectic has four parts. Group thinking. Okay, I'm not going to go over that one right now, but let's use this one here. So they'll be like, oh no, this is our group. We only listen to this guy from the past that does Buddhism. We only listen to this ancient Taoist script. I can't use my own understanding, the art of the logos, to judge whether this new information is going to be beneficial or harmful. Our tradition doesn't teach us the art of the logos, so I don't know. I have to stay blindly loyal to my tradition. Buddhism for life. Taoism till I die. Republicanism until Jesus comes back. Whatever. Blind loyalty to your own beliefs you already carry, because we don't have the art of the logos to think and judge for ourselves. Specifically, what's the shadow of truth, the cause of our problems, and what's the ladder up? And Socrates is saying, this is what I need to pass on to you. The art of the logos. So, which means as we are learning the art of the logos and how it's applied to philosophy, the path of understanding dianoia to enlightenment, to know the nature of self, reality, mind, existence, and the soul, we should also be applying our learning of the dialectic. By the way, dialectic has 4 parts: definition, demonstration, division, synthesis, and analysis. A quick example, if someone said, hey, what's a bike? I don't know what a bike is. You can give a definition. Oh, a bike's got handlebars and wheels and a chain and pedals. Okay, that's an answer. That might be sufficient, and then your conversation can go on. But if he's like, actually, no, I don't quite understand, you would have to go from definition to a demonstration. So this, you could say, is self to self. What can you say about the bike itself? But then, how does it function? Self, subject of the dialectic, which is bike in this case. How does it function to others? That's called demonstration. Oh, well, my bike can help me. So you have to pick a term for other. I'm going to say me, the bike owner. My bike can help me get to the store quicker so I can buy ice blocks. It helps me get to places. Oh yeah, friend of mine. Oh yeah, no, I get it. I know what a bike is. We can move on. But you go, no, I don't quite understand. You can go into the division step, which is what? Others that you've just talked about, how a bike relates to you. How do you relate to others now that you are a bike owner? Well, I can give my friends a lift to the store too. I can join the BMX club and make friends. I can impress girls when I do sweet wheelies. That's others from here into, so every stage rolls on. There's a flow to it. What's the bike itself? And then what is that bike itself that you've defined here? How does it relate to another? And then how does that other coming here relate to other others? I can impress girls by doing wheelies. I can make friends at the BMX club. And then finally, how do these others relate back to the bike itself? So it comes all the way back to the start, which is ousia, the ability to turn around and know yourself. But by going through understanding, by going through this process, when you get back to the definition, you've seen more about it. You can understand a bike better. So using all that, someone said, well, okay, well, can you say more about a bike? Oh, so how do I relate to a bike? I have to keep the air in the tires. I have to keep the chain well oiled. I have to put streamers on it. So when I go to the BMX meets, the girls look at me when I do my jumps. So by going through this process of understanding and explanation, either or, you understand the bike in a better way. So you're not just turning back around to the start, you are spiraling upwards. That's philosophy. That's the spiritual method of understanding. And of course, by going through this, you probably learned more about a bike, so you can do another dialectic. Only we're not interested in bikes, we're interested in what justice is, or what beauty is, or what truth is, or what soul is, or what reality is. All of these words which we call self-er terms, because it's self-beauty, or self-justice, or the self. So that's the dialectic. But if you go through this, you don't just define what it is. When you do a dialectic, you have one page for what it is and one page for what it isn't. A bike is not a car. It's not, a rocket ship. Demonstration. It does not help you do your homework quicker. So it's what it isn't. You have to do both. Now, that's going to help us understand Socrates, because he's talking to Cebes, his friend, with him in the prison cell, about how he got into philosophy And he's leading his friend through a dialectic. And he starts by saying, okay, what is beauty? And he says, by the way, beauty is not an adjective. It's not one of those examples in the physical world. It has to exist in being. So the word is means exist. And in philosophy, exist means in being, eternal existence, not temporary. So he's going to define what it is, but he's also going to define what it isn't. He'll say, hey, some people say beauty is all about shapes and colors. It's not that. That's silly. Or what makes somebody tall? Somebody says it's a foot because you're taller by a foot. So therefore, what makes you tall is a foot. But no, that's not true. So he's saying what height or greatness or tallness isn't. Notice he's talking about causes. Causes. What's the cause of beauty? Not shapes and colors. What's the cause of you being taller than your friend? It's not a foot. Because you can say, well, what causes him to be a foot shorter than you? A foot. Hang on a second. How can a foot cause me to be taller, but a foot cause him to be shorter? How can hot cause one thing to be hot, but one thing to be cold? It doesn't make sense. In other words, he's saying, hey, look, if you look to the physical world for causes, you're gonna fall short. But I'm not just going to tell you that. I'm going to lead you through that artfully. What we call the dialectic, this. And we want to see if we can find the bones in his conversation, find the structure, because we need the art. Because, hey, we might be in a negative state of mind. We might have a nihilism for thought. Nothing is important. I suck. There's no meaning to me. We need to be able to have a conversation with ourselves to say, hey, that's not true understanding. And that's going to take you out of that state of mind. Understanding and state of mind. By the way, understanding you can call definition. State of mind is how you demonstrate it, your feeling state. So you can say this thing is about enlightenment, state of mind, spiritual experiences, states of mind. This is about understanding. This is about demonstration. This is about definition. So even within the latter, we can see the dialectic, which is important because if the dialectic is the paradigm, the model for everything, we should be able to see it everywhere. In your screenwriting, in your music making, if you're a musician, in everything, in the levels of reality, in our levels of spirituality, in our levels of thinking. Definition, understanding, demonstration, states of mind. But also in our reading, if Socrates is going to be not just a hero, an adjective, but the hero, if the Phaedo is the greatest story of the greatest hero, he can't just address a particular problem here or a particular problem here. He has to give us what we need to solve all problems. The problem solving. Not solve a problem, solve the problems. That's our standard for him. And not only that, he says himself, this is my standard for me. Otherwise, if I die, I'll be like a bee. A bee stings you and dies and leaves behind after he's dead a sting. Ouch. I don't want to do that. I want to leave behind the best thing. And of course, that would make him the ideal hero. He has to be able to define what makes him the ideal hero, define this art of the logos. He has to be able to demonstrate it. If he's in a conversation with CBs here, he should be able to demonstrate the dialectic to help him see. So the particular conversation is about the soul. CBs thinks that the soul, we can't know if this is our last incarnation. We can't know if we're going to survive after we die. We have to be able to know that our soul is immortal and indestructible, and be able to prove it. We have to know it and prove it. Nous and understanding. demonstration and definition. Otherwise, this fear of death we all have is sane, it's rational. So Socrates has to vanquish his fear of death. Socrates says it's like singing a song to a child to help him get over his fear of the boogeyman. He has to demonstrate his use of the art with his friend. He has to be able to define the art of the logos. So Superman can demonstrate what it's like to be a hero by punching the villains in the nose, but he might not be able to define what justice is, which is kind of like most comic books have superheroes that can demonstrate their power, but they have no idea what justice is. So they're always in conflict. Professor X thinks it's this, Magneto thinks justice is this, and they fight. Yeah, that's humans. That's human culture up till now. Because without true understanding and verifying that understanding in demonstration in their spiritual experience of being, there is just opinions. Wolverine's opinions against, I don't know, Cyclops' opinions or whoever, and they fight each other with their muscles. Or Andrew Tate's opinions against, I don't know, school teachers' opinions. And whoever's got the most Bugattis wins. It's bollocks. This religion against this religion. This politician against that. Just opinions. It shouldn't be verse. That's the dialectic. Versus is debate. Debate bros. Most philosophers on YouTube, they just debate each other or talk at each other. Dialectic is together, because it's a ladder we both climb together. By understanding about yourself, the other person who's asking the questions also understands themselves, because we're the same self ultimately. Up here, there's no difference. Beauty itself, soul itself. And the Greek word for that is hyparxis. Hyparxis, he says, hey, by the way, beauty itself and justice itself and goodness itself and greater itself and lesser itself, these are all beings, but they have the same peak. That's called hyparxis. And we call that self-ousia. And if our souls are immortal, and we learn by remembering that, then our soul must have known this before we were born. Now, Seebees is okay with that. He knows enough about learning to know that we never physically experience beauty itself. So how do we recognize it? We must have known it before we were born. He goes, okay, yeah, fair enough. We never see equal itself, but we can hold up two pens and say, oh yeah, they're kind of equal to each other. We never see it in our physical world. We must have known it somewhere. So it's okay, fair enough. The soul existed before we were born, and all learning is ultimately reminding us, remembering. But that doesn't mean we're going to survive forever. What about maybe this is our last incarnation? That's where we are in the text. So Socrates has to demonstrate his art of the logos to help free him from his problem. Because we know it's a problem because he's already given us a good argument for the immortality of the soul. So this is a standard that he has to, if he's going to be the ideal hero to save everyone, not everyone in particular, solve a problem, but solve all problems from A to thee, from Latin to Greek, because Latins don't have the word thee, modern philosophy, which is just about A's, personal opinions, examples, to Platonic philosophy or Socrates philosophy, which is the single philosophy. He has to be able to define the art of the logos, have to demonstrate it in this argument, but also has to divide it. That's the third stage. He has to divide the art of the logos up into its key terms, into its patterns, following a structure, so that if we read properly, as an active member, as a Sherlock Holmes,
Sneaky little hobbitses.
Sneaky, really being sneaky in our reading, because we are philosophers too at our nature.
You're a wizard, Harry.
we join the adventure in our reading,
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
then we need to take these divisions, bring them together. That's synthesis. And when we see all these divisions, look for the key terms, look for the patterns, look for the themes, look for the structure, bring it all together for ourselves. That's synthesis. And the next part of that last stage is analysis. That will allow us to understand the definition, the art of the logos, in a new way. So Socrates is kind of doing these two. We have to do these two. So Socrates, through time, through 2,500 years, is having a conversation with us. And it's a conversation we can only have in the last 5 years. Because that's the only time we've had the actual terms for division. The key terms, the right translation, the right key terms specifically. The key terms and patterns are only there. And puzzles. There are certain puzzles that you can only get when you realize certain words have more than one meaning, like the word self. Okay, so we can only play this game now. Which is fascinating that we're in this part of history. Because we can use, Socrates is from 2,500 years in the past, defining the cause of our problems today. Demonstrating that there's a way of solving our problems today. The problems that we all suffer through. Division. By the way, what are our problems? Wealth inequality, war, competition, capitalism, exploiting people in the planet. It's always me versus them. Republicans versus Democrats. Americans versus anyone else who has oil. Jews versus Palestinians. Rich versus poor. It's always verse. What's another word for that? Division. The cause of all our problems can be understood with one word or synthesized together. So all of these examples were divisions of our problems that he defined and demonstrated. And what can we do? We can take those divisions and synthesize it. That's step 4 of the dialectic. There's only 4 steps. It isn't very much. Into one word, division. Notice, the word that defines all of our problems is literally one of the 4 terms of the dialectic. Exactly. The world in the chat, the world would be a much better place if philosophy was taught early in schools. That's absolutely true. Now, take that idea and turn it into a dialectic. Because secondarily, it's important for you to master it so you can help the world, but primarily for you, for yourself. So take this as a question and practice the dialectic. So, make your statement a question. What if philosophy was taught early in schools? Okay, that's your question. So open a document, whatever document program you like. Obsidian is a fun one, but just Notepad is fine. And say, what if... So notice it's a hypothesis. It's an if statement. What if philosophy was taught in schools? Now you have to have 2 pages open. Okay, if you have a reason for saying that in the chat, please share. I'm open to it. Okay, so the first thing is if it is taught in schools and if it isn't taught in schools. So this is a way of preparing your soul, learning the art, and improving your understanding all at once. This is the game. So the first paragraph, definition. What can you say about philosophy in schools itself? So definition can also be called self to self. Then, demonstration. So maybe define philosophy, like take all of the terms from today's talk and put them in one paragraph. You can say what's true about philosophy, what's false about philosophy, and what's true and false. And now you've exhausted, that's everything. Oh, okay, you can watch this on YouTube and do it later when you've got time. Define philosophy. Now, demonstration. What would it be like if this philosophy you've defined is taught in schools? And imagine it's an exercise of your understanding and your imagination. Remember, we have both. We have understanding and knowledge. We have thinking and states of mind. So imagination is part of it. Now, what would that happen if all of those schools, this is division, schools, how would they relate to other people? What would happen if all of the lawyers went to school and learnt this at school? If all of the priests learnt this at school? If all of the policemen learnt? If all of the politicians learnt it? And then finally, if they all become all these people, how do they then relate back to philosophy that you defined? But you then open your second document and do the same exercise. If it didn't happen, if it wasn't taught, what would be the definition of the school? Or what would be the definition of philosophy if it didn't exist? Notice, exists means exist in being. So if you only learnt personal opinions at school, division, fighting, define that. How would that demonstrate at schools? What would the implications of that be divided up into all the areas of society? And finally, all of those people having been affected by that process, how do they relate back to philosophy? Both if it is and if it isn't. Now, once you've done that, share it on the Discord. Because it's fun, it's your work. Share your imagination, share your work, share your... Now, Socrates is saying, actually, you can do one more thing. Go through your two documents, what it is and what it isn't, both of which are... So you can say there's actually 8 terms in the dialectic, technically. There's 4 if it is, 4 if it isn't. Now take all those key terms and represent them with a key character. Like maybe you're writing a story and you've got characters in your story. Or Socrates said, I'm not really good at writing stories, so I'm going to use Aesop's fables. I'm going to use characters that already exist. So for us, we don't know, Aesop's fables aren't really well known today, but we could say Spider-Man and the Marvel superheroes maybe. So if you say, philosophy exists in being, philosophy has the logos. Now find a character to mythologize as a metaphor being. Find a character to represent logos. So maybe one's Captain America, one's Spider-Man. Now, the way in which these terms relate to each other need to also be mythologized in your story. So you've got 4 acts in your story. So definition, not just what if philosophy is, but what if Spider-Man gets bitten by the spider? Yeah, I know. And I'm asking you to put words on your feeling. So we can address it. So we're not divided between each other with different opinions. If there is a true way of understanding, that's what we're after. And if you're seeing something that I'm missing, you can help me. Likewise, vice versa. So in other words, I'm asking you, where are you at? So if there is an understanding of the text, you are going to be at some level of that understanding, but because you're a human being, you'll have some level of block. So you can ask where you're at or where you're stuck. Now, Socrates said in the Phaedo that part of the art is realizing ideal people are very rare. Just like very, very tall dogs are very rare. And very, very tiny dogs. So tiny you could barely see it. So if you can barely see it, is it really a dog? Is it really here? They are very rare too. So, he says, hey, look, we're talking about mythologizing. Let's just finish that thought first. So, got 3 acts. Defining what Spider-Man is, which is a mythological representation of your definition of philosophy. How does he demonstrate it? Now, your dialectic is if philosophy is taught in schools. So your 2 terms are, by the way, dialectic means 2, so you need 2 terms. One is the self term, one is the other term. So for you, self is philosophy and other is schools. Or you could flip them, up to you. But dialectic means 2. So there are 2 sticks you rub up against each other to understand them both better. Okay, so philosophy could be Spider-Man, and schools is other. You could represent that as Mary Jane or the people of New York. So demonstration, how does philosophy relate, or how does self relate to other? How does philosophy relate to schools? In your mythological representation of your dialectic, it would be, how does Spider-Man relate to Mary Jane? Or how does Spider-Man relate to the people of New York? So you're taking the terms and relationships and using them mythologically. Socrates says it's important to do both. And he got that message from his dreams. So that's another layer of curiosity to philosophy. Why is Socrates following the instruction of his dreams? Why is his dreams master and him follower? The fundamental takeaway of Phaedo is knowledge is recollection, or in modern terms, a priority. Right, well, that's one of the many things, right? So we've gone through, we're about 3/4 of the way through the text. This idea of learning as recollection, and by the way, you can see all these, you can go through it together with us on YouTube. Looking for our notes on this. Right, so the first part we looked at, no, full stop, no what, was Socrates gave his doctrine of philosophy. And we can say that's kind of a definition of philosophy. So that's the first part. So you can say, oh, the Phaedo is about Socrates' doctrine for philosophy. He said this is a defense of philosophy. And hopefully my defense of living the philosophical life convinced you more than it did the jury, because they're killing me. So, well, the first part is the introduction where Socrates and Phaedo are talking about it. And that's important because we have to look for the mythology. How is the drama representing the material? And so there's a lot of puzzles. Like, who was there? There were 14 people. Interesting. Why? They talked about, Socrates' death was put off until the ship came back from Thebes, which was a ceremony to represent purification in honor of the god Apollo. So what does the god Apollo represent in the text? What does purification represent? These are two key words that repeat all the way through. So that's the opening. Now, in the first part, after the opening, Socrates talks about his relationship with dreams. So you could say, the meaning of the Phaedo is learning to understand the instructions we're getting from our dreams. Why? Why is he following dreams? So that's a big question. If Socrates is saying, I am following the instruction of my dreams, there must be a reason. So everything that follows in the text about what philosophy is, what makes you wise, who should be ruling you in your soul, these are standards that must necessarily apply to the dream master. Let's read it. So he talks about, he starts by saying, send my wife home, she's crying, which is, again, why? What's going home mean in philosophy? He says, pain and pleasure are united from one summit. So if Aesop were to make a myth, again, making a myth to represent your understanding, he would say, you can't reconcile pleasure and pain. Division, war against opposites. But you can unite their summits to the same. So a one-headed monster, we could call it. Because in the same way, my legs were suffering when I had the chains on, but I took my chains off my leg, and now pleasure has come to light. Okay, And then Cebes intervened and said, "By Zeus, Socrates, you did remind me, for others have already asked me about the poems which you have put to verse. The logos," what does logos mean? "Of Aesop, and the introduction to the hymn of Apollo. Even the day before yesterday, Euvenos asked, 'What in the world have you got in mind?' And he goes on to say, 'I was trying to find the meaning of certain dreams.'" The word is literally dreams. "And being atoned in the case of repeated commands from the muse, to make this, for they were of the same, such as this, the same dream I often came." Well, okay, so you are going to voice your opinions that you hold already about the text. Now, that's why this is a read-along. We're going to see what the text tells us, and we need to be able to change our minds, which is hard for lots of reasons. But we have to look for the puzzles and solve them. So certain dreams that are commands from the muse. So we have to look for questions rather than giving the answers we already have. So where's a question there? What the heck is the muse, and why does it communicate to us through dreams? The same dream came to me in my life, appearing to me to be saying the same logos. What? How does the dreams communicate logos? Oh yeah, the word is dreams. Why do you say it's not accurate? I mean, I can look it up. The word is dreams. But we don't have to believe whoever told you it was the wrong, because we can think for ourselves. Look. Enipion. Enipion means things seen in sleep, dream. Okay, so let me show you what we're doing. So somebody told you that it is not the translation. All right, that's okay. That's where we start. We start at a level of opinions, but we need to go from opinions to seeing for ourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this part here, the word dreams. Now this is why we can only play real philosophy up until in the last 5 years. So if I was a betting man, if some philosopher told you that, I'm going to bet he's wrong. Now, I'm not blaming him. It's not a blame game. We have only had an accurate translation in the last 5 years. And there are historical reasons for that we mentioned earlier in today's talk. And you can watch these again on YouTube to revisit them. So we have the more accurate translation, but we also have the literal Greek underneath. So we copied it, and now we jump over to... because we have the internet. Another reason why we can play the game. We're not being kept by people who call themselves philosophers. We don't need that shit. We can think for ourselves. So let's jump in. Oops, I'm going to pull it up on screen. This is important. Philosophy is not about division or gatekeeping. Everyone can play and should play. Here we go. So we paste it in here. This takes the Unicode from the text and puts it into Greek. We chuck it into Google. Enipion, so we know how to say it. We can go to this, which is an online ancient Greek dictionary. Paste it in there. And then we can see the definition. Things seen in sleep, a dream, simply a dream. So we can have it for ourselves. So now, when you go back to the class and the teacher said, "Oh, no, Socrates doesn't follow his dreams. That's crazy. That would mean there is a significant, important level of intelligence and care being bestowed to us through our dreams that Socrates is able to recognize, so much so that he follows it primarily. That would change the whole game of understanding dreams for human beings. Or we'd have to conclude Socrates is a crazy man. He's stupid." Now, we can't say that because he's Socrates. This is why the same art of the logos that Socrates is passing on to us can be applied to dreams. Dream analysis, not dream interpretation. There is a language of, just like we can represent the dialectic through mythology, so too are the personal messages sent to us about our problems and our highest goals. So too are they represented communicated to us in our dreams. So, let me pull up this. So we've been talking about. So this is just at the beginning. So already you've got a bunch of questions in your back pocket. You're doing really well. Should I be listening to my dreams? What level of intelligence does dreams have that Socrates is listening to them? And why the heck did my teacher not mention it? These are all good questions. Take them with you. Why? Because that's the game of philosophy. Philosophy isn't about giving the right answers. Literally, that's what Socrates is saying. People who claim to be philosophers but aren't. That's the game they play. Trying to convince people they have the right answers. This is us. This is a philosopher. To be in the game.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You have to. This is the archetype of the hero's journey. The archetype of video games. You have to be seeking excellence. Why? Because you can give up. You know what? I went to school and I learned all the opinions from my professor. And I got a degree and I'm earning money. I'm content with that. I don't care if it's right or wrong. I want to say there is no right or wrong. It's just sounding smart or being able to win debates. If you seek excellence, you're not going to be happy with that. You want the truth in whatever you do. So if you're not seeking excellence, you're not in the game. So we have to seek excellence. This is what it means to be a philosophical adventurer. We have to look for key terms in the text. Pull them out. Now, certain key terms are going to be relevant to the text, like this one, when he talks about fate, or chains, or Apollo, or purification. These are key terms set up in the opening as like a guide, just like a tutorial level for a video game. Look for these. If you see a chest, open it. If you see a barrel that's red, that's going to explode. So we look for them as we read. Now there are certain universal key terms. We call them self-er terms. Self-beauty, self-justice, self-equality. Pull those out too. Now, look for patterns. Develop questions. This is the big one. Because this is not just an understanding tradition, but, well, to gain new understanding, you have to be puzzled, but also to be meditating, to open yourself up to experience these higher dimensions of reality, like being. You need to be contemplating. You're naturally contemplating a question. You need to be open to a new answer, a new insight that's going to be unexpected. Hey, if you've got a question, you know that you don't know, so you're going to be open. Oh, for notes, I use an app called Lorian. And in order to try and keep this channel going, I have a Patreon that you can subscribe to, and one of the levels allows you to copy my notes. So you can... But yeah, Lorian is the note-taking app. Questions. Do the dialectic. That's what we talked about today for our friend Beast Rice Maker, I think it was. Yeah, the sketchboard is called Lorian. It's a free drawing app. So we encouraged him to take his question about what would happen if philosophy is taught in schools and do it in a dialectic, because we have to practice the art of the dialectic, says Socrates in the text. But also represent it mythologically. Socrates is saying, I'm not really good at making my own stories. I'm going to use Aesop. So it's okay to, no worries, to use Spider-Man, or if you're like Harry Potter, make Harry Potter fan fiction. To represent the key terms, the patterns, and the relationships of your dialectic in mythology. Or if you're a musician, use it in your music. Develop hypotheses to answer your questions. But these are all sacks you carry in your inventory. Whoop. Skill trees. Once you start to notice patterns, you'll notice certain things are arranged in triads. Hang on, there are 3 parts of the soul, but there are 3 excellences of the self. But hey, the gods are represented in pairs of 3s. There's Apollo, Aphrodite, and Hermes, 3 gods representing philosophy, beauty, and the dialectic. Take them in your inventory, in your skill tree. Because what will happen is you can take one triad and rub that stick against this stick in your skill tree and gain new insights. Make new connections. And of course, this is our weapon, the sewing needle of infinite truths, the snit, where you can sew all of these together, all of the text together if you've been playing the game in this way to gain new insights. So by the way, this question about dreams is a new one. It took someone in the chat, took Time Spirit in the chat to ask a question, say, hey, I thought this. Then we went to reread, dreams came up, and hang on a second, I wasn't told anything about dreams. So sharing your questions, we went through and we reread it and we realized, hang on a second, we're about 60% of the way through the text, and he's saying the art of the logos is important. So this is why we go back to the start in the dialectic. So if the art of the logos is so important, what's that link about? Then, then as we go back to the text, what we just sort of passed by. Oh yeah, he listens to dreams. That makes sense. I mean, dreams are probably important. Even we know that now. I mean, dream analysis is rare, but okay. But now that we go back, we can make it into a question. Does the dream master have the art of the logos? Because if he doesn't, why the heck is Socrates listening to him? So we're developing new questions by going back. Yeah, so literally, Time Spirit, we just did look at the context. We can go back, we'll keep reading if you like. So he got certain dreams. The same dream came to him often, saying the same logos. "O Socrates," it said, "make and work at music. And indeed, in times past, I thought this was to cheer me on." Right, so the word here is night visions or dreams. But this isn't the first time Socrates talked about the significance of dreams in other texts, in the Republic, in the Symposium. It's not unusual. And of course, there is an art of dream analysis that uses the dialectic to unpack dreams. It's a new discovery. Well, it's an old discovery, but it's been recently formalized. So it's the new paradigm of psychotherapy. But it's been buried for a long time, so that could be why it's unusual. But the story of Achilles in the Iliad is a story of the worst possible person going through dream analysis to recognize the cause of his problems and address it with excellence, to not just purify himself from his problems, but develop an excellence and reach certain enlightenment states of mind. So it was within the context of the time, it was really well known. It's part of their tradition and mythologized in the Iliad, that even the worst person, through dream analysis, can understand the cause of their problems, free themselves from fate, and reach their highest destiny. So I actually practice dream analysis myself because it's awesome and because of these reasons. So the dream was saying, do music. I thought it was encouraging me to do exactly what I was doing, because philosophy is the greatest music. And that's interesting. Right, yes, exactly. Messages from the divine. Now our question is, how do we unpack those messages? Because dreams aren't literal. Like even now he's like, oh, I thought it was like, because dreams aren't literal. They're mythological. They represent, analogical, we would say. So, yeah, good point. Philosophy is the greatest music. So I thought he was encouraging me. Kind of like people encouraging runners in a race. Like, yes, run the race, run the race. I am, thank you. I'm doing it. But since the trial took place, and this festival of Apollo, interesting, Apollo is the god of music and the god of philosophy, philosophy being the greatest music. I thought I should, in case the reoccurring dream was commanding me to make popular music, I should not disobey it and make it. For it would be safer to, don't poo-poo academics. Oh no, well, yeah, again, we're understanding. A philosopher and a professor. Oh, cool. But it's not blame. We're always interested in understanding causes. Now, so it's not polite, by the way. It's polite to allow everyone to have their ignorance, but it's very dangerous. Like, we kind of allow that until there's a significance. Like, oh, Uncle Joe thinks he's a dentist. Oh, all right. You know Uncle Joe, he thinks he's smarter than everyone. He's on Facebook learning this and that. But as soon as Uncle Joe starts pulling out a hammer and whacking children's mouths with it because he thinks he's a dentist, we go, hang on a second. Whoa. No more Mr. Polite Guy. There's a significance to people acting on their opinions. So if Socrates was killed for spreading this view, and that had a knock-on effect leading to the kind of philosophy Socrates says is the opposite of philosophy, we can't be polite to those who killed Socrates. We can't be polite to those who are doing the opposite of, oh yeah, you can call that philosophy. That's fine. There's a significance. Particularly if real philosophy, what Socrates is outlining, gives us what we need to solve problems and reach excellence, and that which isn't, which is based on only the physical world, only opinions, rejects the logos, rejects being, rejects all of the key terms we're learning ourselves, then we literally do not have what we need to solve problems. And the never-ending fate, repeating cycles of tyranny, bloodshed, and destruction of humanity will continue until the species dies. Many species have gone extinct, so too can humanity. We need to wake up to the truth, thus awakening philosophy. But there's a reason why we can only do it now. Literally, as we go through this text, we compare it to the previous translations of the text. And so certain keywords that are fundamental, we can see for ourselves, are not in the previous translations. The word logos ain't there. The word wisdom ain't there. Not only that, one of the key puzzles in this text is how do we go from the virtue of wisdom to the different virtue called phronesis. He calls it the currency that you trade your virtues in for. The only real currency. The reason why we develop the virtues is for this thing called phronesis. If you go into the previous translations, the word phronesis and the word wisdom, two very different things. That's the root of our question that we need to pick up to be a philosopher, a questioner, a puzzler, Sherlock Holmes. Both words are given the same translation, literally making it impossible to read what Socrates is saying. Up until this translation, where we have the actual accurate translations, sometimes because this translator is also appealing to the masses, certain words he keeps in the Greek because we don't have a English translation. Some he gives a vague English translation, but we have the text. Like we did when you said, oh, I'm not sure dreams are actually there. We looked it up. So literally, if Socrates is being the ideal hero, passing on that which we need to solve our individual problems, escape our fate, and reach our excellence both in this life and the next, as well as secondarily being able to save humanity, then only now can we play the game, which is fascinating, because only now do we have the level of technology to that our problems, if we don't play the game, have global extinction level effects. We have the technology to extinguish our species and destroy the planet, which is the inevitable fate or consequences of not picking up this game. That's why I'm doing this channel. Like, this used to be because of the Socrates was literally murdered for talking this way. Because part of human evolution is loyalty to your old beliefs, and we talked about that. That's part of evolution. Inside cave good, dear leader, yay. So we have these comical fascists like Donald Trump. How the hell do they get people to follow this guy? He's literally the worst person. Like, you name a crime or a vice, he's done it. Then why do people like him? Because that's part of it. When we were surviving as cavemen, we didn't ask questions. We didn't have the art of the logos. So actually, is it right what you're saying? No. You believe him no matter what. Same thing with Hitler, same thing with fascists. So there was a survival benefit before we developed language. And now we're in the hangover of that. But we can learn language. We can think for ourselves. We can read for ourselves. We can uncover these. Hey, if dreams commanded Socrates, what if our Parliament House was run by dream analysis? What if our dreams told us who to elect? Holy crap. So Time Spirit was saying, hey, in the past, the Greeks thought dreams were messages from the gods. Imagine if that providential communication from the gods was used to run our world. Wow. Owen Wilson would say, wow. And his brother would say, wow. And his uncles would say, wow, 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 wow. And what's curious is we have what we need to pick up the game. Literally, Socrates' words were dropped, but we can pick them up. By the way, if you do dream analysis or philosophical midwifery, which is applying the art of dialectic to your personal problems to free yourself up from your individual problems and reach your individual excellences, you realize that's what we do as well. There were certain goals we had as children where we accepted the false beliefs about ourselves to remain safe within the house. The inner critic, we might call it today. The internal negative dialogue. You're not good enough. Your mind isn't good enough. Your goals are not good enough. That kind of crap that prevents us from our highest excellence. When we go back with the art of the logos in our back pocket to readdress those false teachers, we can pick up where we left off. You were doing good work up until then. And that's what we're doing here. We're picking up where Socrates left off. We are doing philosophy. The dreams are commanding us to do philosophy as the greatest music, but also to compose myths. So he's not a myth maker, so he uses the myths of Aesop, puts them into verse. And that's what we encouraged our friend Rice Maker to do today. You had a great question. What would it be like if this philosophy was taught in schools? Fantastic. Now, use it as an exercise. Do the dialectic. He's cleaning, so when he finishes cleaning. And use the myths of Aesop. Now, you might not be familiar with the myths of Aesop. Maybe you can use the myths of Harry Potter or the myths of Luke Skywalker. By the way, it will be a pretty cool script. If I was to put $1 on it, I'd bet that it would probably read pretty well. So here's what's, and by the way, if he's doing that, he is becoming like Socrates. And we've been learning the significance of what Socrates is doing. So there's a lot of questions in here. There's why follow dreams? Why create myths? What is philosophy? Why is philosophy doing our life's work in the right way? Why is he saying to follow him to the journey where he's going? Don't commit suicide, but why does he go on to say philosophy is the art and practice of dying? What? The best overseer, there is some overseer of the realm of being and over us. What's that? So we've got a whole bunch of questions. Those who pursue philosophy correctly pursue contacting nothing else than dying and being dead. Dying and being dead, that's true philosophy. What the heck? What? That's crazy. You're crazy.
What? What?
Flibbity-gibbity nonsense.
Socrates, you're talking nonsense. It makes a joke. True philosophers are engaged in death and deserving of death. But the people don't know the kind of death. So these are all questions that would help us when he gets to start talking about separating the soul from the body. The philosopher liberates the soul from the association with the body. But we also seek phronesis, self. We want to acquire self-phronesis. We still don't know what self-phronesis is yet, but we're getting clues. The ideas that we seek, beauty itself, goodness itself, magnitude, health, strength, they're all one thing. The ousia, they're contemplated not through the body, but through dianoia, accurate understanding. So how do we do that? Maybe this is why we do the dialectic. Maybe the dialectic is dianoia. This person approaches closest to noesis. Now, again, we don't have a word for noesis. We don't have an English acknowledgement that we have a cognitive faculty that can apprehend the realm of pure being, that which is immortal and deathless. So we say intuitive knowledge. In past translations, they might say knowledge or wisdom, but it's too vague. This translation uses the best word we have, knowledge, sticks intuitive in the front to say, hey, it's not regular knowledge. It's not knowing about tree frogs or knowing about, how to ride your bike really fast. But the word is noesis. We need to add these words back into our language. By the way, if we did have it, these people who claim to be experts say, oh, by the way, I'm Andrew Tate, and there's no actual knowing. There's just appearances. So if you appear smart like me, or if you appear strong and wise because I've got a cigar and I've got a Bucati, then that's the highest level of knowledge that you can have. If we had an English word for nous, any idiot could say, hey, Andrew Tate, what about nous? What about noesis? Of course there's a realm of being we can know. We've got a word for it, you idiot. This is the significance of having a good language. And we talked about the modern philosophers are in the tradition where they don't have a word for the. And all of the previous translations that used self-beauty, self-good, self-magnitude, self-health, the ousia, whatever the self happens to be, words that are self-er terms that refer to being, self isn't translated properly. They took out one of the most important goddamn words in the text. Of course, self has 3 levels of meaning. We talked about that before. But this is the significance that we can pick it up now. But when we do, it's going to be different than everything you heard about. It doesn't matter. We're in a conversation with Socrates. And we need to behold the self-realities ourselves by being in a pure state, liberated from the body. And you know what? The body and its desires gives us nothing other than war, civil discord, and battles. For the sake of the body that we are compelled to acquire riches, being enslaved to its care. Socrates is listening to dreams, but if we don't and listen to the body, it's war, civil discord, and battles. He's predicting the problems 2,500 years in the past. It's this false attachment to our body and our physical senses that cause our problems. Likewise, and he goes, hey, also, if you spend your lifetime enslaved to the care of your body, you got no time for philosophy. No leisure for philosophy. And even if you do have some time for study, the body pours in and presents itself in a clamor, pouring in, driving us out of our mind. Yeah, it sucks. I'm doing this stream and I got to take a break to use the bathroom or eat a sandwich. Boo! Boo. But we want to get in a pure state, liberated from the body, so we can behold the self-realities with the self-soul. Again, here is a puzzle. The word isn't soul, it's self-soul. If self has a word that means an honorific in the realm of being, there's an aspect of our soul that exists more primarily, eternally, in the realm of being, making it the self-soul. And if it's the self-soul, we have the same soul. These are puzzles. I mean, that's a question. That's not a conclusion, by the way. That's a puzzle or a question that comes from reading the text as it is. To read it as it is to read without interpretation. Interpretation is adding what's not there or leaving out what is there. Does that mean we have the same soul? Wait a minute. All these divisions, war, civil discord, and battles that we've been talking about here. Is it going to be harder to kill our fellow man if we realize we have the same soul? Not just realize it, but understand it. Where's the word dianoia? Here we go, dianoia. Through understanding, dianoia. Not just understand it, not just trust it, not just understand it, but have noesis of it, the intuitive knowledge of it, in other words, experience it directly, if we understand we are the same soul, and can prove it through the dialectic to ourselves and to our friends through the art of the logos. And we can literally experience it. So a verification of our understanding in direct experience that we call noesis, or in English, direct intuitive knowledge. It's clumsy. Then it's going to be hard to kill other people. Oh. 2,500 years ago, he was laying it out for us. And killed. Before the guy who started, like, he didn't write anything down, sadly. The guy who did, Plato, didn't reach the level Socrates was at, and was therefore not able to apply that art of the logos to midwifing Aristotle, who completely missed the mark, didn't even get into this at all, remained in the level of physical, and that's our current tradition. So it's fascinating. But today, in the last 5 years, we've had what, because I say 5 years because this translation was 2021. So, and he might have had another one from 2020. But literally, only in the last 5 years can we pick up what Socrates was laying down, which is fascinating. But also challenging because, yeah, you know, there's a philosopher and a professor in the chat, and he found these ideas challenging. And even more so if your career is based on it, or your identity is based on it, or your paycheck is based on it, it can be challenging. I'm not dismissing any of that. I'm encouraging him. Especially since we have to survive in this world, and survival often, for experts, means acting like you know everything. Oh, and by the way, if you don't know anything, punished, go to prison, get a bad grade, lose your job. So we have to pretend we know even when we don't. It's backwards. We live in a backwards world that we can right the ship if we pick up this game. Right, and he goes on to the virtues. Someone who's not a lover, a true philosopher, is someone who's a lover of the body. By the way, we want to encounter pure phronesis. Still don't know what phronesis is. So that's a puzzle. What the heck is phronesis? We yearned for our life for true phronesis. What the heck is that? It can only come when you separate from the body. So it's not your final death. Socrates says it's the practice of being dead. So, you know, leave your body lots before they bury you. Otherwise, you're a lover of the body. Philosomatos, which can manifest as a lover of riches. Philokrimatos, or lover of honors. Philotimos, or a combination of both. but we want to, by the way, the virtues, mastering some desires to be mastered by others isn't true virtue. So we had a question, what the heck is the true virtue? Then he talks about the initiation. So the four virtues: wisdom, directed towards being; virility, the state of being encouraged; sound-mindedness or temperance; and justice. So these are the four virtues that we learn. Upgrade to temperance is the same, justice is the same, courage is the same, and phronesis. That's a rite of initiation. If you die without that, you will end up in the mud. But if you are perfected and purified, you will dwell with the gods. So our incarnation will be good too. And as the mysteries say, on many other staff bearers, few are the actual mystics or spiritualists, and those are those who practice philosophy correctly. Now, mysteries is interesting. Notice these are mysteries. Very few people are ready for this. They killed Socrates for talking about this. Even if it's the truth, even if it's what will help save humanity and help us. Why are we not keeping it a mystery? No time. No time left. No time. Too many nuclear weapons. Too much genocide happening now. Too much pollution of the planet. Don't have time to keep it a mystery. Share it. Tell everybody. Tell your professors. Tell your teachers. Tell your parents. Tell your kids. Tell your kids. Tell your wife. And we have a text that you don't have to believe it. You can read it yourself. And so he's given, well, if that's the case, if we have to separate ourselves from the body to prepare for an afterlife, to make the virtues that we do through practice the ultimate virtue, level up, and to reach those higher cognitive functions of understanding and dianoia and noesis, then that means our soul has to outlive our body. So then there were four arguments as to why the soul is eternal and immortal and goes through a process of reincarnation. One of them was the theory of learning that our friend in the chat pointed out. One of the key parts of the text is learning as recollection. So of those four arguments to show the soul was immortal, one of them, the one Socrates gave the first three, what were they? Bring up our notes. Just from memory, if the kind of logos is a back and forth of opposites of the physical world, then if there is a being alive and coming to be dead, there must be a coming to be alive and being dead. Otherwise, the world would have an impotence of this particular kind. Also, if we come to be from something, there has to be a resource. It can't be a physical resource, so our souls can't come from the physical world, otherwise we'd run out of resources. Also, the Enderman argument, if you can think of sleep to be like death, we go to sleep, but then we wake up. Enderman is a mythological person who ends up asleep, and he stays asleep forever. So we would all be asleep forever if we didn't wake up, if we didn't come back to life. The fourth argument was that all learning is recollection, which is an important one. It's talked about in the Meno. CB says, hang on, Socrates, I've been around you for a while. I know that one. Let me have a go. And he outlines it. CB's buddy, Simmias, says, I'm not familiar with that. So CB's gives a demonstration, gives a definition and a demonstration. He uses the dialectic well, so we give him some good marks. But then when Simmias says, I don't understand, can you break it down further? Can you go from demonstration to division? Third, remember there's four? Definition, demonstration, division, and then synthesis analysis. Can you divide it up? Step 3, he wasn't able to. So we can judge, he didn't have the art of the logos yet. He's still learning. Socrates jumped in, he broke down that time spirit mentioned, learning as recollection. And then they were happy with that, but then Socrates says, come on, surely you've got some problems. Where are you at or where are you stuck? Same question, 2 ways of asking the same question. Where you stuck? Any objections? Like, come on, we don't want to bother you. So no, this is my swan song. Swans sing the greatest song before they die because they know they're going to somewhere great, so they're happy. Because they can prophesize that. So too does the art of Apollo, philosophy, allow prophecy. Philosophy allows prophecy. So all these questions, how could Socrates prophesize 2,500 years into the future, the problems we're facing now? Prophecy. You have the art of prophecy as a philosopher, which is puzzle. One of the many questions in our question sack we carry with us on our adventure.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So in prophesizing, the swans prophesize that they go to a better place. They're going back to the good. So then they do have an objections. There are 2. There's the Simius's one, which was the soul is harmony. Like a lot of physics people or atheists or materialists think this way. There is no soul. It's a byproduct of our physical body. It's brain chemistry. It's endorphins and neurons and neuroelectrons. That's what the soul is, nothing more. And of course we would say, well, what about near-death experiences? What about spiritual? There's a lot of ways of arguing against that, but Socrates picked out a certain one, that the virtues are harmony. So this is a sneaky play.
Sneaky little hobbitses.
That philosophers like to do. They don't just answer the question, they answer it in a particular way that to address you as a person. So he could have answered this problem of harmony, soul is harmony, in many different ways, but he actually said, I'm going to talk about the virtues. So we have a question, why? Why did he want to tell us to know that the virtues are a kind of harmony? Because he did introduce the virtues. After he gave the doctrine of philosophy as the art and practice of death and dying, he did start talking about the virtues. Why? And he started bringing in, philosophers don't just want truth and being, they want phronesis. Why? There's a puzzle there. Happy with that, soul can't be harmony, because if the virtues are harmony, then that means there's 2 harmonies, but that means that there's no such thing as vice, because vice would be disharmony within your soul. So we look at these terrible people like Trump and so on, and they are very conflicted, divisive within themselves. So there's a lack of harmony within themselves. That manifests also in how they demonstrate themselves. They act in a unjust way. So if the soul is harmony, it can't also be disharmony. Doesn't make sense. If the soul was hot, it couldn't also be cold, because these are opposites. So that was good. And then CB said, I've got a problem. That even if we do have reincarnation, and I accept that our soul had to exist before we were born so we can learn through remembering, it doesn't mean being a human wears our soul down. Maybe being a human is like a disease, and it wears our soul down, that this might be our last incarnation. So that's where we are now. Socrates thought about it and says, you know what? You have to learn the art. Oh, by the way, he also, in between there, he said it's important that I pass on the art of the Logos. Because, hey, a lot of people claim they're smart by rejecting Logos, rejecting being, and rejecting the art. They're lovers of the body, and they try and convince people to believe them. That's their standard, because they're not real philosophers. They're not worthless, because part of the art is realizing everyone is between worthlessness and excellence in this angle here. So again, there's nothing good about being a modern philosopher in the Aristotelian physical materialist tradition, the Latin tradition. There's nothing good in it, but there are problems. There's a certain level of excellence that they've reached and no further, and certain problems are blocking them from their development. That's just the way it is. With every human being. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have to do that. Necessarily, it's the human condition. It's not sin. That's another thing, to vilify the quest. You have to pretend you're perfect, act like a saint. That's bullshit. Every human being has a problem and has an excellence to seek, a destiny, a fate and a destiny. We have to learn the art to address it. And that is necessary for it to be a true spiritual tradition. And that art, if it's a kind of learning we can take with us, might be necessary to get into the club upstairs. Or evolve to a better place where there, as Socrates says, better men and gods than we find here. So, with that in mind, you have to learn the art of the logos. So I'm not just going to address this problem of we don't outlive our last jacket. We might outlive many bodies the same way we outlive many jackets in our life, but we die in our last jacket. This might be our last reincarnation. So we have to... Socrates takes that argument and polishes it up nicely. We need to polish up our hypotheses, ifs, possible answers, and we have to polish up our questions, and he polishes up CB's really nice. He says, okay, let me polish up your argument, CBs. By the way, feel free to add or leave anything out. That is... he mentions, by the way, right before he mentions some key words, which are clues. He mentions, by the way, physical training and medical treatments. What's that? What's the allegory of that to the soul? He mentions the best way is to advise yourself through dialectical conversation. First time he dropped that word. He mentions some level beyond belief. What's that cognitive state? He mentions suffering from fate and our destiny tied with logos. So these two words, dropped those in. I think first time he talked about destiny. So dropped a whole bunch of keywords before he began his way of addressing it. So how he addressed CBs, we need to look to as a model to understand ourselves so that we can do what the text is saying, learn the art of the logos. First, polish up the argument. Because as a philosopher with the art, you might understand it better than them. Like the doctor with the art of the medicine might be able to explain the condition of illness or health his patient is in better than the patient, because he's the one with the art. So take their language in, start from their language, common language, and polish it up nice. And he does that. He says we have to demonstrate our soul is immortal and indestructible. So that we can be extremely confident that we are going to a better life in the afterlife, better than if we lived according to vice. That even if the soul is mighty and divine in nature, we have to show that the human body is not a disease in the beginning of his destruction. We have to therefore know and prove logos. So there's our two: state of mind and understanding, knowledge, nous, and eidos. Interesting. Knowing tied to idea. So you have to know and give logos. So know and understand that our soul is immortal and indestructible. Immortal and indestructible. So polish it up nicely. Do you want to add anything? Have to ask that question. No, that's good. Okay. Then Socrates went into a state of contemplation. We've already mentioned the significance of contemplation. He was absorbed in self. And then he said, by the way, this is actually a good question. And here is the heart of it, the cause of generation and destruction. So he's already identified from his meditation what's the turning point of the argument. Cause of generation and destruction. Hey, is our soul immortal, or does it destroy? Does it destruct? We have to know what is the cause of generation and destruction to see whether or not that cause applies to our soul. Does anyone else want to play? That's another part of the art. If someone else can do it, let them do it. Pass on the art. Encourage people. Bring them into the game. Say,
You're a wizard, Harry.
and say,
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
okay, no one could, of course, because he's Socrates, and well, because that's not fair. They couldn't at the time. So he said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my personal experience. I need you, from my demonstration, to do the division and the synthesis part. I'm going to engage in a dialectic with you. You have to see what comes to light as useful. You have to put it together, and you have to make use of it to persuade us. So he's setting the conditions for the other people to learn. And then he started talking about how he got into philosophy. He was interested in learning, very much so. Learning about why things are the way they are, which is a question of causes. Dialectic is an unfolding of causes and then a reverting through causes. You could say reality itself has a cause unfolding from self, and then we revert through self. That's the art of the logos, the reversion upon our first cause, which is why we call it the first and final cause. What's the first cause of building a house? Is it the wood? Is it the builders? Is it the blueprints? No, you have to need a house to live in to even begin the whole process. It's the first cause. How do you know when a house has been completed? What's the final cause? When you can when you get the keys, when you can go in, when you've got a place to live in, when you can live in it, that's when you know it's done. So you can say that need to live in a house is the first and final cause. So too, the self through the logos. And so that's the dialectic, unfolding from the cause and returning. So that's what we have to learn, but also it's what began his journey. I wanted to know the cause of physical things. Why were they the way that they were? He felt like this idea that you're taller because of a foot. He says a head, but we're going to say foot because we use feet more than heads nowadays. Horses, we use hands, but he uses head for. He uses a horse is taller than another horse by a head. A person is taller by another person by a head. Funnily enough, we say humans are taller by feet, and horses taller by hands. Weird.
Wow.
Anyway, but it can't be a foot that makes you taller because the same foot makes him smaller. And has a bunch of examples like that made him unsatisfied with physical causes justifying why things were the way they were. And then he applied it, said, Anaxagoras came along. Right. He's the guy, I think, who wrote the first season of Friends. Should I let that joke die? I think so. He said, by the way, minds are the cause of things. Socrates loved that. He was willing to follow him. But then he realized, no, he didn't really get there. 2 reasons why. He kept falling into physical causes, bones and sinews. And he didn't realize, that if there's a cause that we call mind, there must be some condition for it to be a cause that's even more causal. Causes are one thing, but conditions for causes are another. So there's another level he missed. He says, hey, these bones and sinews would have been making their way towards Megara or Boeotia if I didn't have the opinion that it was the best. So the real cause for him sitting here with his bones and sinews isn't his bones and sinews, is he thought it was best, he thought it was more just and more beautiful. These are all we can recognize from our reading aspects of ousia, or mind, or being, that which is knowable and the truth that we seek. That which we stamp the seal, that which absolutely is, and can unify in the hyparxis, or high point of self-ousia. So these are causes, even for him in the physical world. Here it is. So he didn't like this because he didn't use a view to that which is best, and he also wasn't able to discern that why the cause. Okay, a cause is in reality one thing, whereas that without which a cause would never be a cause is another. Our translator gives us a little bit of a clue, says, "Oh, the good," because our translator, thankfully, knows that there's a level above goodness and justice and beauty called the good. Actually, it's the good self or the one self, but it's a higher level in being, which is important, because if we're going to a level of being in the practice of philosophy, we want to bring our logos and dialectic skills and interest and practice through the virtues with us so we can play the game there. He says, hey, the problems with loving the body is it's the cause of war and civil discord and strife and violence, but also it stops you from doing philosophy. Even if you do have time for philosophy, it comes clamoring in and drives you out of your mind. So if we can separate from our physical senses, we'll be able to do philosophy better. And if there's a level above being, then hey, might be a fun place to play. Which might be why Socrates is saying, hey, follow me to where I'm going as quick as you can if you're a true philosopher. Maybe. Wow. Okay, so he didn't realize these things. So they didn't investigate the power by which they are disposed in the best possible way. So he missed this, like, oh, if there's a mind, then it must be using its best idea. And also this demonic force. He threw in the word daemon, which is a big puzzle, because that's why he's in prison. In the Apology, in the past translations in the Apology, they translated it as, Socrates, you believed in other spiritual things. The word is daemon. It's not spiritual things, it's a specific spiritual thing called the daemon that he references in other texts. He's referencing it again here. So this daemon is a force that must be present for mind to create things the way that they are in the best possible way. So something about this daemon, which we might be seeking to become ourselves, maybe, if daemon is the sorts of people in the higher realm, and we have to go there through likeness. What was the quote? It is unlawful for that which is not pure to be with that which is pure. In other words, it's through likeness. So we want to be like a daemon, maybe. And it also gives us a force. Even back early days, Socrates recognized that they were ignoring the daemon. Which makes sense, because Socrates, in his apology at his trial, said, yeah, I've had this inner voice communicating from self my whole life. So he must have even been familiar with it then. They look for physical explanations, like a giant atlas, a later day atlas holding up the world. And they don't realize that the good must truly bind and hold selves together. So that could be the good of the realm of being, or maybe the good that even holds together the causes in being. Don't know. Question goes in our question sack. Okay. I was deprived of a good answer for the cause of the way things are the way they are, and neither could anyone else give it to me. So would you like to hear what I did next? My second quest for causes. And that's where we are. This was a summary day today. Thank you for those who participated in chat. Second search for causes. And hey, that's where we are. If you seek for causes, you go to school, they give you physical causes. That's stupid. Because you wouldn't be sitting there because of physical causes. You have a reason to be there. Something in your mind that considered it best to go to school and learn about causes. And you're also ignoring, hey, what's keeping causes together? What's keeping all of this together? So like Socrates, we find ourselves in a similar situation. Let down by the fact that no one's offering us solutions to the most basic questions to make us rational. Because this idea of causes, why are we here, and what's best to do while we're here, and where we're going next. These are the three fundamental questions that would make us rational human beings to join the human race. It's like playing a game. What's the aim of the game? I don't know. Well, how do you play the game? Well, where do you go? Where's the finish line? What's the goal? I don't know. What? Okay, well, what's the character story? Where did you come from? I don't know. That's irrational. So what do? You get conned by people who say, oh, believe me. Don't read for yourself. Don't understand for yourself. There's no such thing as knowing, so you can't confirm the experience of the afterlife. Nobody knows what happens when we die, right? Isn't that the kind of stuff that gets said a lot? Of course there are people. That's Socrates. And Euvenos. And you and me. And others who are in this game. Right? Oh yeah, but okay, you can't understand it though. Of course you can. That's philosophy. That's why it's the true spiritual tradition. Many other staff bearers and all that. So you can, okay, maybe you can understand it and you can know it, or maybe Socrates could, but you can't help others. There's no artful use like there is to help train doctors or use your medicine to help others, art of medicine to help others. There's no art of this. Yeah, there is. In fact, Socrates says, this is what I need to leave behind. And Us Reading says, this is what he needs to leave behind for him to be the greatest hero. Not just define it, not just demonstrate it, but divide it up so we can pass it on. And maybe pass it on so that when we have it ourselves, we can add to the tradition. We can make the superpower or make the quirk even stronger. Add to it. Evolve. Anything less than that would be less than perfect, because you just add that extra thing to make it even better. This is our standards for Socrates, and maybe the standards he's setting for himself here too. And is the standards for us. Why are we here? If we knew everything already, we must have to come back with something additional to make it better. And why is humanity going through the suffering it's going through? There must be some necessary good. It must be the best possible for it to be the way that it is. There must be some daemonic force holding the world together the way it is. It must be good for it to be that way. It must be the best course for humanity. It must be just and beautiful on a higher level for humans to be suffering in this way and on the brink of its destruction in this way. How can we answer that? That's a big question that we've been carrying with us all this way. But here, maybe we're getting an answer. It's compelling us. There is an imperative to master the art of the logos. In a way that's not around now. Wasn't around for Socrates. He figured it out. He wants to pass it on. Wasn't around for us, and we looked at the historical reasons why. Not blaming, just understanding. Not being polite, not being dumb and stupid and being a nice, polite idiot and allowing terrible things to happen. No, we're not being polite either. We're being truthful and good. We're doing what is most just, beautiful, and doing what's best. Telling the truth. And discovering the truth together. Not through debate, not through putting people down, through dialectic, through bringing people up. Helping people see, understand, and know their divine and noble nature through the art of the logos. We need to do it now. Maybe that's why it's best for the world to be the way it is. If so, how do we do it? How do we make the jump from the physical world of division, of war and discord, to the realm of being, where we can liberate ourselves, know the truth, purify and solve, thumbs up, our problems individually, and share that with the world through an art? How do we make that jump? Well, hopefully next time, Socrates will show us how in his second quest for the cause. And we can take his anecdote, his personal experience, divide it up into its key parts, because that's what we've been practicing, apply the dialectic to it, make it our own understanding, and maybe verify that understanding in our own direct experience and become masters of the art ourselves. Secondarily, for humanity, primarily for ourselves, to live the best way we can and go into the next world with supreme confidence. We've lived the best possible way, and we're going to a better place than if we lived without it. Than if we lived with vice. That's what we're going to do next time. In the search for the second cause. On that cliffhanger and on that bombshell, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you soon.